David's going to have a chat about training flight instructors, UPRT instructors. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I've got tools up here. Does this do anything?
Press the top button. What? Oh, no, it's all good. There we go. It's on fire.
I think most of you know me, but there's some here that I don't know. But, I've been around quite a bit. Been doing this sort of stuff for quite a while now. Not representing CAE today, but I'm not going to say too much specifically about CAE. My flaw as a flight instructor is I'm really an engineer. So when I'm instructing, I try to get my engineering brain out of it. But unfortunately for you guys today, you're going to see the engineering side of me. I spent some time at the Pips factory as a production test pilot, and also for quite a while I was a USA FAA engineering delegate for Part 23 design certification. Sorry about the engineering in advance. And why dinosaurs? My grandson loves dinosaurs, so I'll get to see a lot. I also like going back into time and seeing what things are like years ago, and this has already been mentioned, nothing much has happened in the last 80 years or so. So I'm going to talk a bit more about dinosaurs. I think it was Paul who said he wants to learn more about dinosaurs and the cesspit of misinformation, and talk a little bit about EASA, plus our own spin and aerobatic training endorsements. Peter's going to look after my time, make sure I don't run away, isn't he? Every time I think about Australia's Flight Safety magazine, I can't help but think about this particular article, The Unreachables, Are They Unteachable? It talks about the cesspit of misinformation, half-baked truths and misshapen facts, promulgated by white men over the age of 60, dinosaurs such as myself. And then it goes on to say, never resort to personal insults, but that's where they lost me. But it's a good point, this cesspit of misinformation. So I want to talk about this for a little while, the dangerous misinformation that is around. I'm going to show you this video shortly, and you can focus on that little white thing, that's an aeroplane, and it will shortly start spinning. It's not supposed to happen. So she dropped the phone. Just briefly, extracts from a couple of ATSB reports some years back. One of them noted that there was incorrect incipient spin recovery guidance provided by CASA. Some misinformation around. Might fight the audio there. Makes me angry reading that report. Flight instructor, the incorrect spin recovery procedure for that aeroplane. It's a pity he didn't do a couple more spins while he was in the aeroplane himself. Otherwise, he would have found that his recovery technique was not appropriate. Also, the flight manual in that aeroplane was a factor, according to the ATSB. They've been in that aeroplane for 50 years, so not a big deal, is it? In fact, most of that time was mandated by CASA. I'm not going to pick on CASA, I don't mean to pick on CASA, but another example I want to talk about, the dangerous misinformation. It's in CASA's cap. on aerobatics, and this went through quite a lot of industry consultation, but ended up with this description of manoeuvring speed, VA. Below VA, the aircraft will stall before structural limits can be exceeded. Not quite right. VA manoeuvring speed is controlled, determined by FAR 23, the Design Airworthiness Regulations, and that's explained quite clearly in FAA's advisory circular here. This is what it is not what the caps there says it is. And only if VA is equal to the stall speed multiplied by the square root of limit load factor. Press on buttons. Will the aeroplane stall at the limit load factor? It goes on to say for aeroplanes where VA is greater than the stall speed multiplied by the square root of load factor, you will exceed the limit load factor. So it's up to the pilot to control the load factor. What is VA, the design manoeuvring speed? It's a value chosen by the applicant. I've been an applicant, I've chosen VA, and it may not be less than stall speed multiplied by the square root of load factor. It can be more. And as it says down the bottom, it's used to design for the structural design of the controls, not for the structural design of the wings. I want to give you an example. Take note, David, I'm going to be asking questions later. This S2B, stall speed is 60 miles per hour, limit load factor is 6, do the arithmetic, and you'll get 147 miles per hour. It's the speed at which full backstick will get you 6 Gs, but VA, maneuver speed, is 154. So if you do the arithmetic, you'll pull 6.5 Gs with full backstick at maneuver speed. So you will break the aeroplane, you're exceeding the limit load factor. S2A, S2C, same maneuver speed, different stall speeds, but same maneuver speed. And when I look at the S2S, S1S, S1T, they both at the same maneuver speed. Look, there are a lot of airplanes around which the maneuver speed is greater than stall speed multiplied by the square root of the limit load factor. So you can break airplanes getting full backstick at maneuver speed. And being an engineer, and David, take note, this is all for you, for your benefit. From an NTSB report where a pit's broke in two, both fuselage longerons were broken, the airplane broke in two. Just quickly, that's the fuselage truss of the pit's S2B, the cabane struts with the top wing up there, the rear cockpit, front cockpit, and the longerons broke just in there. Both longerons, so the fuselage just broke in half. I did a bit of finite element structural analysis plus some flight tests with accelerometers and strain gauges on the aeroplane. And in particular, we were, I guess, exploring what these words meant in that advisory circular. Got an aeroplane where VA is greater than VS root M. And also these words here, we skipped over those words before. Even if VA is equal to the VS root N, we'll stall, it doesn't say at the limit load factor, it says near the limit load factor. So it's more than just simple arithmetic that comes in there. Now, this is not new. I discovered this text probably 40 years ago. It was published in Sport Aerobatics magazine. This is an extract from the Cap 10 flight manual. full and quick deflection of the elevator below maneuvering speed can cause the overstepping of the limit load factor and can cause braking. So even below the next routine, you can brake aeroplanes. So with the S2B, with our test data, found that 139 miles per hour with a sudden full backstick would give me 6 Gs. So doing the arithmetic with VA of 154, I didn't do it. Doesn't matter in the pits, does it? You can get 7.5 Gs. So point of that is that steel tubes truss, subject to fatigue, you don't need to do that very many times before you'll break something. So we had quite a few S2Bs break their fuselage truss by snap rolling the aeroplane too high speed. So another bit of misinformation around, which is dangerous. Change of pace. A few years ago, last time I was in the States, I went to this seminar on loss of control. Everyone was there. It was run by the head of the NTS. So NTSB, yep. FAA was there, AOPA, EAA. And it's good to see Paul dragging Australia into doing the same thing. Thanks for the conference, Paul. It's been great so far. I've enjoyed all the presentations.
Thank you.
Paddy Wagstaff was the keynote speaker. We didn't hear from Paddy this time. Did anyone give her talk?
No, Rich just extended his.
Yep.
That's good.
So Paddy's takeaway comment from that seminar was that pilots need to unlearn bad habits, and then she's explained where they got that bad habits from. That was from their initial training. So touching upon some things that have been said already here today. I want to talk a bit more now about what the EASA is doing. We're finding that a lot of customers are requiring the EASA Advanced UPRT course in their CPL course. They don't all want the same thing, but the common basis is they want an EASA Advanced UPRT course embedded in their CPL course. And so when I talk about training UPRT instructors, I'm talking about training instructors so that they can deliver the EASA Advanced UPRT course. So short course of dual flight instruction, at least 3 hours. And I noticed your course is 4 hours, I think Shane said earlier. So it's
4 flights, not necessarily 4 hours.
okay.
Plus, splitting hairs.
That's right. EASA defines some completion criteria, and they also define specific upset scenarios. They've got some good guidance in developing UPRT instructors. One comment here, which has been said before today, obviously, that UPRT is not aerobatic training, it's not spin training. EASA includes incipient spinning in their UPRT course, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Lots of good stuff here. So having said that it's not aerobatic training, there's a lot of good guidance here which is common to aerobatic training, specifically the UA aspects of aerobatic training, where we'll also find that the students do the wrong things. So training students to deal with loss of control situations. They're going to do the wrong thing and make it worse. I'll try to press this button on top
For the pointer?
for the pointer.
There we go.
So a few good comments there, you can read them as well as I can. But potentially dangerous is taking the aeroplane outside its service, its certified flight envelope. It's so easy to have it with some of the upset scenarios and the UA scenarios. And I mentioned starting the instructor as well, so obviously we need to deal with that in the instructor course, dealing with in flight and also in the classroom, common student errors and what the student may do to you. The incipient spin is defined by EASA in this context of UPRT training as non-commanded bank in excess of 45 degrees, but going no further than a 180 degree change in direction, so maximum of half a turn. This is one of my friends learned to fly a few years ago, and I got this video from him, which just seems to neatly demonstrate the sort of incipient spin that the EASA is looking for. Nice little yellow aeroplane. The EASA Advanced UPRT course specifies 5 hours of theoretical knowledge, so it was done earlier, illustrating the upset recovery training aid for 2 editions of that. There's a lot of information there which is going to be all new to an instructor, so it takes quite some time in the classroom to get to an instructor to where they can reasonably deliver the appropriate knowledge in the course. He also talks about an academic understanding of the factors related to spinning, both upright and inverted, different words than in the custom mods for a spin instructor. I'm not going to compare words. That seems to me to want to know more than what CASA is asking for. A lot of things to consider in the course. As I said, a lot in common with the UA aspects of aerobatic training. It's interesting that EASA requires that UPRT instructors demonstrate the ability to recover from all spin types. Flat spins, accelerated, inverted, upright. Compare that with the CASA's MOS and requirements for a spin instructor in Australia. We don't even have to know about this stuff, let alone demonstrating it. So these are guys, they're intending to only go out and do half a turn, and yet to be UPRT instructors, they've got to go out themselves and be trained in that, just to do half a turn of an incipient spin. EASA has these experience requirements for UPRT instructors. As it turns out, our instructors, around about that stage, by the time I get them to turn them into aerobatic and spin instructors, not for the same reason, different reasons related to career progression. But I must say it is a pleasure working with instructors who have got that much experience. I just like dealing with guys like that. They can fly aeroplanes, and they've seen that students will will try and kill them in different ways. To be able to train UPRT instructors, there are EASA's requirements. You must have experience in delivering the course itself, and then go through and do the course in deemed competent by the head of operations. So much like the system here, but different names. As well as that, they've got annual refresher training required for UPRT instructors. We've tried to include all of the EASA technical requirements in our own training. Not there all the way yet. The 2-year lockdown's got in the way of implementing some of this, but so the annual training, annual refresher training, and the advanced spin training we have included. It's interesting too that EASA does not require UPRT instructors to have any aerobatic experience or endorsements. It's recommended, but not essential. Of course, in Australia, we don't have a UPRT instructor classification, and the exercises are aerobatics, according to CAS's definition. So they need an aerobatic training endorsement. Don't need a spin training endorsement, because I'm not granting spin endorsements specifically for that purpose. And in any case, my observation is if someone's doing an aerobatic training endorsement, they're going to do a spin training endorsement as well. My opinion is that, based on what I've shown you a little earlier, spin instructors need to know more than the characteristics of just one type, as currently required by the modes, and they need to know more about the aggregated spin modes. Training endorsement. As I said, my background as an engineer, I've come from everything, even this presentation, from the engineering point of view. So I've always emphasised the importance of the underpinning knowledge, even back to 1979 when I was started teaching aerobatics. CAS's template for the aerobatic training endorsement, it's got a lot of good stuff in there, but it only allows 2 hours for the underpinning knowledge. I think that's really woefully inadequate, and personally I spend a lot more time in the classroom with the underpinning knowledge, in addition to the other elements in the CASA template. So just to wrap up, you need to go beyond the MOS for spinning and aerobatic training endorsements. The EASA stuff is there, so that's the baseline. As I said, we get a lot of customers want that. They like to tailor it, add more. Sometimes want to take some of the stuff away, but it's usually adding more to what EASA has. And that's been mentioned a few times today, but a particularly important one, I'm training instructors, young instructors. I can remember being young too and full of youthful exuberance, so training them to be an aerobatic instructor and then tell them, no, you can't do that, you're teaching UPRT. And as I said, it's important, appropriate knowledge, particularly important. There is not a lot, but there is some dangerous misinformation around, unfortunately. Thanks, Paul. Darren?
Any questions for Dave?
Just an observation, I've never ever thought about applying full control inputs just because I'm below the A from the day dot, I've always respected the G limits rather than the A limits.
But you're trouble, David. You're an aeronautical engineer too.
I've never, to me, it's asked about thinking, but obviously people do think that way.
Yeah, they do. I've seen airplanes being broken too often.
Right. Interesting.
I think the important thing I took out of that, and other than the fact that pet pilots tend to trust what's written in the POH, is that in startling surprise, in a true upset, they modify for control deflection and actually break the airplane trying to recover.
Yeah, it happens when the inverted nose low, the airspeed's high, and the student does the wrong thing. You haven't got a lot of time to take over.
David, do you think the certain aircraft types are inappropriate for doing UPRT training?
That's a subject for another conference.
The problem with those aerobatic planes is there's no, very light load pressures, so you don't get that sort of sensation that I'm overloading the plane. You do it with your fingers.
Yeah, it's worth talking about a lot of things before getting on to the good question. I think Jeremy can, don't mind me going out of that one, just off the cuff.
I mean, this is the big quandary at the moment in terms of training, is this non-intentional spin certification stuff, the one, 1 turn 3 second bolt on the LSA issue. This is, obviously we've got a category of aircraft that we can do this, but there are a lot that I think the AC was trying to point out that they're not tested. You are the test pilot once it goes beyond 2 turns.
Exactly, and there are some airplanes where it will be unrecoverable much beyond 1 turn. And there are some LSAs which are certified for intentional spinning, but not in Australia.
You're a test pilot, Mr. Liverpool.
No, international LSA certifications include intentional spins. Some are.
Some, yeah.
There's an aeroplane in Europe, looks a lot like a Spitfire. It's an LSA. It's got the same sort of Spitfire profile to the tail, Mark 1 type thing, and they do a formation aerobatic routine.
Oh, there's something to do aerobatics, yeah, but I mean, in terms of speed certification, they haven't gone through Part 23 or anything.
Sure. Well, that's a conversation for another day. ASTM certification and all that sort of stuff.
So, David, summarising what you put there is that upset prevention and recovery training, everything is about spinning and aerobatics in terms of loading the plane and manoeuvrability and everything else. How is that going to fit into something that's limited to that little small little of the flight envelope for upset recovery training?
But you're talking about doing UPRT
with the limits we've got at the moment.
That's not what I'm talking about. I've just got a narrow focus these days.
Yeah, I understand.
It's been a long time since I've taught ab initio. I just teach UPRT in an aeroplane which is certified for aerobatics and spinning.
Me too, yeah. Difficult.
But that's not what Neil was talking about. At the early stages in the training of talking about things.
Yeah, I think somewhat of a epiphany for me today is this premise that once we get an increased weight, and we're assuming that, Part 61, all grade instructors have got a spinning endorsement for spinning recovery and spinning. Clearly, it's a long way short of what you would expect and what I've heard today, and what the ASA has outlined as a baseline in terms of competency to teach that.
Exactly. As I said, I think the MOS has some deficiencies too. I know Colin was asking.
I didn't get an answer.
You didn't get an answer. Yeah. Good to ask.
I think there's, coming back to what I said earlier, we need to break our discussion of what we've been talking about today into 2 parts. One is embedding the UPRT culture into our initial training, which is in possibly, most likely aircraft that are not certified for aerobatics or intentional spinning. And the other one is full-on UPRT component. So when we look at focusing on, we need to train our instructors to be delivering the stuff better, there's those two important parts. One is, effects of controls and teaching them to turn properly and basic stalling and all that sort of stuff, talk more about aerobatics and have these culture words like stick position and unload and all that sort of stuff. But then there's the actual advanced UPRT instructor. And I think that whilst there's a definition of what Dave was talking about with regards to the requirements to be a UPRT instructor under the ASA requirements, we're going to have to come up with something that defines what a normal flight instructor and how we're going to teach flying better. And you can't just have somebody like that video I put up with that young fella, he wrote learn what he was given on a piece of paper, increase the back pressure, increase the back pressure, increase the back pressure. No, we need to train people or develop people into using these key words into, I'm increasing the angle of attack by increasing the back pressure. And when I reach my stall stick position, I am going to stall. It just so happens that at 1G wings level at idle, you happen to reach VSO at the time that you reach the stall stick position and exceed the critical angle. But it doesn't always happen like that. So
that's why I said the pattern at the moment is instruct to demonstrate, not instruct to learn.
Exactly.
And when you start introducing the correct terms like angle attack, flight path versus attitude, and things like that, you actually are getting the student or pilot to actually begin to understand the problem.
So what we need to also consider then is that, with great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility, or great knowledge comes great responsibility. We don't want to arm instructors with this expectation of delivering UPRT components into the basic flight training in aircraft that aren't endorsed or certified for spinning or aerobatics. Otherwise you get that BA40 thing happening again. So we are going to get over exuberant instructors who go, oh, mate, I got this, we're talking about recovery training, I go out and do basic stalling here and talk about angle of attack all day, I'll just show them this. Well, hang on a minute. So there needs to be a very specific framework on
well, my problem is if you don't demonstrate it or they don't experience the full envelope of what you're trying to show, that's not really teaching them upset
I
recovery.
understand, but that's the two different camps. We're talking about, if I'm teaching somebody in the TechNam, P92 Echo, 600 kilos, not ultralight, but it's not certified for intentional spinning, and I go and do stalling, I will do falling relief in the TechNam, and I will show them that, you need to balance the rudder, balance the airplane by picking up wing drop with the rudder, but I cannot teach them full spin. That's why we have the decathlon, and then through our flight training we say, okay, you've done basic stalling, advanced stalling, now get into the decathlon and do the upset recovery component. So we just need to be careful that we keep in mind there's the two types of camps. The camp is better teaching the basic syllabus by having upset recovery wording and phrases and culture and content, but the instructors need to understand that they can't teach upset recovery training that of which David was talking about.
But that's basically for saying, like, if we taught the effects of controls the way it should be taught, we wouldn't need upset recovery. Like I said earlier, that if there's some commonality between the standards of what's being taught for each of these bullet points in the syllabus, we'd probably be a lot closer. But you need, mind you, you need an aerobatic aeroplane to demonstrate this, to teach this properly, not just demonstrate it, to teach it to instructors, for sure.
Okay, I totally get what you're saying, and Greg sitting at the back is doing a brilliant job all day. Thank you, Greg, for keeping the refreshments going. How many times do you hear me say, remember back to effects and controls, remember back to straight and level, you get a guy with 800 hours. Remember back to effects and controls, right? And if they weren't taught effects and controls properly, then because of the perishable skill of the thing, he might not remember, because learning to fly, particularly in the six-pack, in the first 6 lessons that are the underpinning foundation, it's like, we tell our students, it's like drinking from a fire hose. And here it comes, whoosh, and they're just like, and all this information's going past. And then you get somebody who comes back to do a flight review or something in 500 hours, and I had one guy for 1,000 hours, been flying for 25 years, didn't understand that the horizontal stabilizer created a downforce in normal flight. And he just looked at me, and I said, are you okay? He goes, you've got no idea how many questions that answers. After 1,000 hours and 25 years. So obviously that bit was part of the fire hose that went past it. But we can refresh that by saying effects and controls, and then again in straight and level, and then again in turning, and then again in, and then another one of my favourite questions, and Greg will smile. You're flying along straight and level, pull the power back to idle. What happens? Oh, the nose will pitch down. Okay, why? Oh, that's a good question. I never thought. Why? And then it just leads into the downforce whole process from there. But in a lot of schools, pull the power back to idle, what happens then? Oh, the nose pitch down. Good answer. Well done. Moving on. Hang on a minute. There's more to the story. And if we don't ingrain that, when we get to do full-on upset recovery training, then we can say, rightio, if we're up here and we pull the power back here, what's going to happen? And if we don't use the rudder, we've got stall plus yaw equals spin.
This is why, I've taken such emphasis on breaking down, because PMI tells us the amount of immersion and understanding in any one lesson, particularly in the world's worst classroom, the cockpit, is probably 30 minutes to 20 minutes. And then you only retain maybe 50 to 70% if you're really on it every week. So this is why we need to take more bites of that cherry in smaller bite pieces and more practice to understand. Yeah, we've just got to halve the size of the first 6 steps and make them 12 steps. Now that shouldn't take any longer, because ultimately when we look at the 20 to 25 hours, we're just loading the primacy part of the syllabus up all with the most important skills, so that when they get to bring it all together and dance the dance around the circuit, those things actually work.
We did get a question from Joel.
For David.
It's actually, would someone ask the CASA rep if they would consider a UPRT flight activity end with a question mark? Endorsement. Pass it on to John.
I think from the instructor training perspective, they'll have to, if they want to mandate on OSAR UPRT training, it'll have to be more than just the aerobatic and spinning instructor endorsement.
And that was where I was getting at before, is what David was saying, is that I don't want to take a grade instructor with a spinning endorsement that says, oh, okay, he can't teach a spinning endorsement, because he hasn't been a specialist for it. But the problem is that that person's not even competent in by any standard, other than that they've demonstrated to an examiner that they can recover from 4 basic spins. So, when we go to Group G, then we're going to start making these instructors saying, oh, it's okay, you can teach a Group G or a heavy iron aircraft because you've got a spinning endorsement. We're not going to stop there. We need to get UPRT, and therefore having a flight syllabus is it's going to come a lot more than that. For a start, 35 cents. It's fine. I mean, obviously those 2 things alone.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where, again, splitting it into 2 parts, where what David's talking about with UPRT instructors is what Jeremy's talking about. You can't just take an instructor out of the gene pool and say, oh, you got a spinning endorsement, okay, you got an aerobatic endorsement last week, okay, and you teach aerobatics, go and do upset recovery training. Can't do that. It needs to be, we need to have a defined UPRT instructor framework that you need to go through. So.
Yeah, my thought was we'd always roll out at that level with maybe 4 or 5, very limited about who will be teaching UPRT to our instructors. And yeah, we're setting up people in this room.
The problem The problem though with, I'm not saying it's a problem. My comment on what you're breaking that down and the analogy I give is that the syllabus is very specific. Teach a person to turn an aeroplane. And I'll use formation as an example. Demonstrate to me that you can go from echelon right to echelon left. Okay? How many ways can you go from echelon right to echelon left? Well, I can pull up, go inverted, go over the top, and roll left.
Right in the wrong way.
That's going to show me about 15 ways.
Well, the right way and about 400 wrong ways. Right? So,
So if I can drop the ball,
yeah.
you're starting to hit the nail on the head. Really, to drive this out to industry, it's got to come from the regulator.
Yeah.
You know, the regulator's got to say, look guys, this is how it's got to be done, because in recent times, the regulators actually stepped back and said, okay, well, your industry, your experts, you do it how you think best.
Okay,
and we hope you don't get it wrong, but if you do, we're going to smack you for it.
Now we're getting into a problem that I've noticed in the last 12 months is that with the Part 91 change, and there was another one that recently happened, Part 139. So if we just look at the flight training, when we talk about that example, showing an echelon left, echelon right, and the analogy I give for normal students is if the MOS requirement says cross the M1 both ways, both north and south, there is 500 ways you can do that, and the outcome is don't die, right? So a smart guy will walk 500 metres down there and take the overpass, but we can teach you to do the Frogger game and just run across. But one's more safer than the other. So CASA doesn't do that. And with what I see in Part 91, they're taking away direction from us and saying, and the example I give is when you teach navigation cross country and you say, when do you have to check the weather? Well, before Part 91, it was if you're going to leave the vicinity of the aerodrome, you need to check the weather. Okay, well, what's the vicinity of the aerodrome? You go and look for 4 other different documents and you come up with 10 nautical miles. Okay, well, I can see the Loungeman from here when I take off. It's 16 nautical miles away. Technically, by the law, I have to check the weather before I go. But now in Part 91, it says matters to be considered before flight. Weather. Okay, and the question I got from one student was, so if I fly the Gold Coast, do I check the weather the same as if I'm doing circuits? I go, I don't know. If I'm doing circuits, I just open up and go, yep, looks good for circuits to me. Do I need to log on to NAPS? Do I, you know, like, it's removing that. And the other one was they repealed Cap 92 about how to make an ALA. So now we've got ALAs that are picking up, or people who manage ALAs, not saying anything, but we're standing in the room, and they pick up Part 139. And they go, we have to make our airfield match 139 because there's no other standard. Whoa, 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 hang on a minute. We're not 139, we're here. So what I'm saying is that the regulations are getting watered down so that the onus is on the pilot. It's up to the pilot to determine if the airfield is suitable to land on. And then they're saying, you need to teach turning. But how do we do that? And there's the two camps. It's the pilot, the instructor that's going to teach the ab initio guys, and then there's the UPRT specific instructor. I think that's the most really important thing. So it's a bit of a minefield. We can talk about it for weeks.